Welcome back to the podcast. Greg Savage, thank you so much for joining me for the third time. And I must say, I didn't just get you on here without a promise. So yeah, thank you for coming
Yeah.
back.
Well, I didn't know it was three times, actually. I may have said no if I knew it was three times. I'm kidding. It's good to be back. Are you going to sing for us now?
Well, I thought of all the different things that I could try. I mean, I've already promised you a glass of wine, which we will do when we're in the same country. So that will happen. That's still voucher to bag. But I did say I will sing an extract from a song of your choice, and remind me what song you chose.
I gave you a Bruce Springsteen song, and being your age, you didn't know what I was talking about. So you come up with Freddie Mercury, as I recall.
So we have Queen. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah, do it.
Actually, you can join in if you like. You can join in if you like.
I
Is
can't
this
sing.
the
I hope you
real
can.
life? Is this just fantasy? Caught in a landslide, no escape from reality. Open your eyes, look up to the skies and see. There we are.
Outstanding. And I now realize why you volunteered to do it, because you actually can sing. So that is outstanding. Well done. I'm not going to torture anyone. I'll talk about recruitment. How about that?
Amazing, amazing. Don't worry, I will not sing any longer. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I know that you're due in the UK in a few months. And right now, where are you in the world?
In Sydney, it's hot today. It's 41 degrees. And then in classic Sydney style, at 5 o'clock, it poured with rain. So a bit of a tropical thunderstorm. Yeah, I'll be in the UK to do 3 masterclasses with the REC in Edinburgh, Manchester, and London, and also at the Recruitment Expo, which is more aimed towards managers. So yeah, and I'll be going to rugby and football matches, obviously.
Amazing. I know you're a keen sportsman. Where do you like traveling the most?
Well, I've been very fortunate, and it's been in my DNA for so long that I've traveled a lot of places, both sort of backpackery and overland and sleeping on the floor, but also more comfortable. I would say that the answer to your question is the same answer that I would give you if you said, which of your children do you love the most? So, oh, by the way, the answer to that is Hannah, but you shouldn't say that.
Hannah, don't
I
tell
hope
your
my sons don't hear this podcast.
Don't tell your
No,
siblings.
no, that's a classic Savage type joke. If you're going to be in this family, you're going to get a hard time. So, but Hannah is my favorite.
Nice, nice. No, I always wonder, and I'm very curious about the person that I'm speaking to, whether it's a potential recruit or whether it's someone who is, as we joke, wizard, god of recruitment like yourself. And I always get this feeling when you come up in LinkedIn. It's a very odd feeling. It's like whatever's going on with the day, whatever I'm struggling with recruitment, everything's okay because Greg Savage is here and he's got some advice that will keep me on track. I always appreciate that. And I always wonder, for you, someone like you has clearly made a decent amount of money through recruitment, and a lot of recruiters are extremely financially driven. For you, would you say, what does recruitment mean to you? Is it about the money?
Well, not now. No, not at all. I mean, I've been in recruitment since what year? Go on, tell me. You be brave if you're going to ask me a question like that. What year were you born?
I've already been brave, no? I was born in 1986, so I am 38.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I started recruitment on January the 23rd, 1980. That's when I started. So my career in recruitment, my involvement in recruitment has been my whole working life from 21. And it's covered a wide range of jobs and industries, and starting my own business and a whole lot of things, and as an advisor, etc. So I love recruitment. I love the industry. I love what we do. Of course, you can love something and still be hugely pissed off with huge parts of it, which I am. You know, I think big parts of recruitment are dysfunctional, and we'll talk about some of them today. That's not all the fault of recruiters. And there's some poor recruiters that let the site down and lots of things. But overall, it's totally intrinsic to obviously my life. I guess the skills that I had, I was a good recruiter, like you probably would have hired me, but in no company that I worked or owned was I the best recruiter. There were better recruiters around me, and I learned from them. Also, there are a lot of people who failed, and I learned from them, like what not to do. But mostly, I think where I hit my sweet spot was helping people become better recruiters and helping recruitment company grow. I won't even go as far as to say I was good at it, but if you look at what happened, those were those things. And so financially, those sorts of things, growing a recruitment company. I mean, the first recruit, I worked at Hayes. It wasn't called Hayes, it was called Accountancy Personnel. It was so long ago, it was before Hayes even got into recruitment, but they bought that company, and that's why I left, not because of Hayes. All those people were great. It was more because we wanted to start our own business. And that company that I started with two other guys called Recruitment Solutions started from 5 of us in a room, and 10 years later listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. So
Nice.
I'm very proud of what we did with that company. I mean, obviously, some of the things we did would be considered very old school now. Everyone wore
Yeah.
suits every day, all
Really?
that kind of
Oh,
stuff.
no, some
But
companies still do. And I love that. I love the suits.
we had very clear guidelines on what was the way to present yourself. But we also did, I think, outstanding training, which has held me in good stead to this day. And we really trained people. We had training sessions at 8 o'clock every morning. I'm not kidding. And
Seriously.
all those things, and we pushed into temp when most others weren't. We even rebranded, the company was called Recruitment Solutions, and we called the temporary part of our business Temporary Solutions. And, I think it was over the top, but we gave it its own brand. Even when you came into the office, you came in a different door if you're going into the temp, because we said we're taking it seriously. And when
Yeah.
we listed, we had 1,000 temps working. So that's
Wow.
what made that company valuable. So, yeah, I mean, I love the cut and thrust of it. I like that it's a competitive business. I like that you get rewarded over time for success. I like most of all that it's a business and a role that you can influence the outcome of what you're doing.
Yes.
So, not to be negative about an accountant, nothing wrong with that at all, but mostly they are, I shouldn't have even said that, but mostly they are evaluating and assessing something that's already there. In recruitment, if I could have 5 minutes on the phone with a candidate before she goes for an interview, I can increase her chances of getting that job like 100%. If you're a skilled recruiter. And I remember when I was a recruiter, I used to, like on a Friday night, we'd have a beer or whatever. And and when I went to sleep, I'd think to myself, that person got that job because of what I did. Not in an arrogant way, but in like a satisfaction, self-esteem way. It's not just, and we sent an invoice and thank God for that. We'll all get paid, but made something happen.
Yes.
And a lot of recruiters have lost that, and they're going to have to get it back because they lost it because the industry became tremendously transactional.
Yes.
And a lot of recruiters hide behind digital. And a lot of them are going to do that even more because of AI. And we can
Oh
talk
my
about that.
gosh.
But the actual secret is to go the other way, because the value, as I've spent so much, I get so many tech entrepreneurs pitching their products to me. They want investment. Mostly they want endorsement. They want somebody who has a bit of knowledge to say this is a good thing. And mostly I can't, because they don't understand what the hard part of recruitment is. And they're
Right.
automating, in some cases, the wrong part, right?
Yes. Yes. I just want to throw something out here that I hear all the time from people, especially recruiters who maybe are failing in their roles. They say, oh, well, I would have made these placements if they'd have gone through, or if they didn't get a counter offer. They almost take the control out of themselves, and they make out that, oh, they were just unlucky. And I loved what you said there about, you do have control. If you do it skillfully, you can predict what will happen. You can have more control, but not always, right?
Look, this is how I describe it. This is a few years ago, but I was having a drink with a group of people after a successful month. A young recruiter guy was talking to me, and then he pointed to a woman on the other side of the room and said, "That's Mary. She's been our biggest biller for 2 years." And then he said to me, "I have never met a luckier recruiter." And I said to him, "Mate, I don't know her, but she's not lucky. She's just fucking better than you." And his face, and that is true, right? So the thing about luck, there is no luck in recruitment. Zero. Of course, if your candidate going for a fourth interview gets hit by a meteorite, that is somewhat unfortunate for everybody. But over time, if you say, "I had such bad luck, I had 3 counteroffers," that is because you're not handling that part of the process well. Of course, things are going to go your way, they're going to not go your way, but from time to time. But if you do things well, and if you sweat the small stuff, and if you influence the outcomes and follow the process and use the skill, you will find you'll become tremendously lucky. And it annoys me when someone says, "God, look at her. She just wanged one candidate in there and he got the job. How lucky." And I'm like, she interviewed him at 7:30 on a Friday night. There is no luck on that. She
Yeah.
did the work, she did it well, she made the match. That's not luck. And so the recruiters are tremendously dishonest with themselves. And they love to say it's the market, it's bad luck, it's the candidates ghosted me. And I know there's rude people out there, but mostly those sorts of behaviors happen because of what you have or have not done. You've got to take responsibility, more. And I don't want to sound like some old baby boomer. I was saying this when I was 22 and I got into my first management job. We've got to own, I call them the moments of truth in recruitment, which are those periods where those episodes where in our process that everyone's familiar with, where you can influence the outcome. And that might be qualifying a job order or interviewing a candidate. The hard part of interviewing a candidate is not understanding their skills and qualifications. You've got to do that well. But the hard part is understanding their true motivation. And a lot of recruiters say, "Why are you looking for a new job?" And the person says, "More money or want to work close to home." And they write it down. That's not the answer. It might be, but it often isn't. And anyway, You got to rank it. It might be one of four things. The real reason they want to work in a new job is they want to work close to home so they can coach their son's football team. Seriously, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that a recruiter's job is to have the skill to unearth the truth and then find the person a job that matches their aspirations. So making a job offer, briefing a candidate. But like a lot of recruiters, this is again a 2-year-old story, but it's still valid. A very good recruiter, I know her well, and she probably won't like me telling the story. I don't identify her. She took a phone call. I was sitting in the office from a candidate, and the candidate was giving her feedback on the job that she'd sent him to, right? Great. And he's telling her, and she said, "Oh, Bob, sorry, I hate to do this to you. I'm having a terribly busy day. Would you mind putting your feedback in an email?" And she
No.
put the phone down and she caught my eye and she went, and her face fell. And I said to her, "Claire," I said, "what the actual?" She said, "God, did I just do?" I said, "You just gave away all your power. He's going to send you an email and say the interview was good. You've got to ask who he saw. Was salary raised? What is he like? Does he have any reservations? Hear the tone of his voice. You can manage that. You can solve it." She said, I know all that. Why did I do it?" But there are plenty of recruiters who never debrief properly, and you do the same with a client. They just get feedback from a client. "I'm interested in this candidate, not that one." And then that little dogs on the beach, they go chase the bone. They need to have a proper conversation with the client. And why don't you like this one? And you learn and you actually qualify the job order better. I mean, these things, probably any recruiter listening to me now would go, "Yeah, I know that." Well, good on you if you know it, but do you do it?
Well,
And most
quite.
recruiters don't.
Well, quite. And you know what? When I first started doing your training, the Savage Recruitment Academy, which is excellent, I dramatically decreased the amount of counteroffers that my candidates had because I managed the different stages so well. And I'll be honest with you,
Good.
I've forgotten some of it. So I need to get back on there and, sort it out. But the valley of death, that comes up a lot. But one thing that I think a lot of companies who are not investing in L&D. Why is that? Because at the moment, we mentioned a lot of people are cutting back on L&D suddenly. How can they do that
Yeah.
well? How can companies really do well with the learning and development so it is implemented and it is effective?
So I'm glad you asked that question because I've been training recruiters for many, many years, and I don't do much of it now unless it takes me to interesting places. And I said earlier, I loved recruitment, but I feel qualified and entitled. I don't like that word, but to criticize it because I do. It's like your children, you love them and you would never, ever not love them, but you feel as though you know them well enough to say you need to lift your game in certain areas. And that's the same with recruitment and recruitment owners. The whole issue of recruiter training is dysfunctional. Right? We talk about it a lot. We do not do it a lot. And where we do it, it is perfunctory and not done in the proper way. And I will say this, Susanna, that the biggest leverage point that you as an owner of a recruitment company has is the skills of your consultants. People don't get this. They think they're going to differentiate their company by marketing. It's borderline, right? We all have the same tech. Everyone's got LinkedIn Recruiter. Everyone's going to end up with the same AI in due course. Everyone will have the same. We all got the same. So the differentiation is the skills, the competencies, the attitude of your recruiters. Plus, if you were to look at the P&L of every recruitment company in the world, 60 to 80 cents, 80 cents is a worry, but 60 to 80 cents out of every dollar, pence out of every pound is spent on salaries. So why not invest in that part where you should? But instead, they spend money on office fit out. I mean, you've got to make a comfortable office, but it's not the place where there's leverage. So the thing about recruiter training where I think it goes wrong, and I don't know if you were recording this when I said it earlier, but a lot of training is one way, it's delivered, and then people put a tick next to them. Oh, we've trained them on that. And even the attendees might say, yeah, that was good. But I promise you, they go back to their desk and they don't do anything different. And the research tells us, and I've got a training academy and all that. So I've done a lot of research on this, apart from what I knew intuitively and from experience, is that within a week, people have forgot 50%. Within a month, they've forgotten 90%. But think of it like this. And I love my sporting analogies, but if I was to teach you or anyone how to kick a rugby ball, and I explained it to you, and then I said, okay, go out on the field and kick it. You couldn't do it.
No.
If I showed it to you and showed you me kicking the ball, you might get a 5% sort of, oh, right, this is what I should do. But you couldn't kick it. The only way you're going to learn to kick it is if you kick it.
Yes.
And then you get feedback from a coach, right? You kept your head too high, you ran too fast at the ball, whatever it was. And that's when you train people, you've got to have a continuous feedback loop. So you talked earlier about role play, and I think that's okay. You never want to humiliate anyone or embarrass anyone, but you've got to continually check in. And on top, a lot of training from recruitment company owners is what I call look at me training. And I used to be like that. I used to take consultants out on client meetings and I would run the meeting. I was basically showing off. And then I'd say to them afterwards, so you know how to do it? And then I realized they know better. They haven't learned how to kick the rugby ball.
Mm.
I've got to go on a meeting with somebody who's been trained and they've got to run the meeting. I've got to be the wallflower. And yes, I'll chip in to make sure it's not embarrassing or whatever. But then afterwards, give them feedback. And that's how they're going to learn. So training like my academy or video training and stuff like that is excellent. But coaching is much better. So I encourage people, for example, on the training academy to sit down with a group of people, do the video on the counteroffer and stop at each point and say, right, do we agree? How are we going to handle it? What do you think, Bob? What's your experience? And then at the end, role play it and
Yes.
then give people goals. If you've sold how to sell exclusivity to clients, exclusive job orders, then everyone's got to have a goal to increase that so you can get traction, right? And the other thing about training is there's a lot of training invested in newbies and underperformers, and that's needed. But we have this weird tendency in this industry. If someone's doing well, we leave them in the corner and don't go anywhere near them. We give
Or
them
they
bottles
can
of
be too
wine
prima
and lots.
donna. They can be prima donnas when
Oh,
they get to
well,
that point, right?
well, we allow them to become prima donnas.
Yeah.
And you need to nip that in the bud. And yes, people must get positive feedback and the accolades they deserve. But actually, with high performers, I would often sit and say, right, great quarter, love it. We love you. However, I'm noticing you're filling one job out of three. And the other good recruiters are doing 2 out of 4 or 1 out of 2. And I'd set them some goals. So they always, it's not to bring somebody down, but it's more to say, you've got to help people go from good to great, right? So we've got an underperformer, you've got to get that person up to at least acceptable, and then an acceptable performer, average, mediocre, but still on the team, up to good, but then take the good from to great. Because if you've got whatever the number is, let's say in Australia, billing 500 a year is good. Mostly that person is held up on a pedestal, rewarded well, and no focus on improvement. But help that person, of course, point out what they've done well, thank them for them, reward them for it, give them a pat on the back, public acclamation, but here's how you go from good to great. And, that's going to add, let's say, take someone from 500 to 700. That individual will earn 50 grand, 60 grand, 70 grand more. And the company will add 130,000 straight to the bottom line. There's a huge win. Plus, it's not just money. It's self-esteem, it's retention, it's happy clients, it's happy candidates.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think there's a lot to do in learning.
What proportion of budget, and it's obviously going to be different for smaller and bigger companies, but what proportion of budget should companies be looking to spend on their L&D?
Well, there's two sides to that. You can put a number on it, but if it's shit training, no matter how much you spend on it, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And it's the same with marketing, by the way. People cut back their marketing when the market's tight. This doesn't make any sense. You've got to spend money on smart marketing and smart training. So I would say 5% of your GP on each of those is an acceptable gross profit, net fee income, is an acceptable number. But if it's spent on the wrong stuff, it's completely wasted. So obviously I have a vested interest. I believe my training academy is good. The money spent on that is nowhere near that. It'll be much cheaper than that.
Yes.
But the real money will be spent in saying to people, right, we're going to have a training session every morning for 15 minutes, whether you're in the office or not, at whatever time, I don't care, 9 o'clock, 15 minutes on a topic. And it's going to be interactive. So we're going to watch a video and then we're going to debate it and then we're going to agree action steps. Now, if you did that, okay, let's say 3 times a week for a year, you would move the whole business forward. You said it earlier. You did the training on counteroffers and you've improved your hit rate of countering counteroffers. Well, you're just one person working on your own. You could probably put a dollar number against it. It's probably quite a reasonable number. Well, if you did that across an entire company, multiplied it by all those consultants, all those saved placements, but then 50 other parts of the process, that's how you get growth.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. Now, I know both of us probably have been in recruitment for more than a decade. So there's a lot of that stigma, that old school stigma that's kind of moved away. So I see it a bit more in the Middle East. It's that kind of beating people around a stick management. I love the film Whiplash. I used to sing in a professional choir where people used to essentially be a little bit bullied to get the outcome that they wanted. And there are still some companies out there who do not lead with empathy. They lead with fear. They lead with, you will get fired if you don't hit those numbers. How can leaders create pressure while still being empathetic?
Well, that's my second favorite topic because there are a lot of people in our industry who've done our industry a massive disservice by deriding KPIs and measurement. You see, the problem with KPIs is not measuring. The problem with KPIs is how they're implemented by incompetent managers who use them as a threat and a tool of coercion. That's not what it's for. But think of it like this. How can you get better unless you know what you're doing now? What sport or field of human endeavor do they not measure so they can improve outputs?
Yeah.
You've got two consultants sitting next to each other, and one's billing 600,000 a year, and the other one's billing 250,000 a year. And they're both smart, intelligent, well-spoken, and work hard. What is your plan for the 250 person? Are you going to go up to her and say, would you mind working harder? That's the dumbest comment you can make. She's already working hard. Or are you going to go up to her and say, make some placements? She knows that's her job. She's doing her best. You've got to measure, because you will find, I'll bet you $1 trillion, that there will be clear KPIs, productivity measures, where she is going wrong. Now, it might be that she interviews 15 candidates a week and only one of them ends up in front of a client. There's something wrong there. It might be she sends 50 resumes a week and one person gets an interview. It might be she gets 10 interviews with clients a week and only one gets a job offer. It might be she fills one job out of 6, whereas the woman sitting next to her fills 1 out of 2. There will be that, right? It will be that. And then when you know that, let's say she's filling 1 job out of 5 and the woman with the high billing is filling 1 out of 2. You can work with the 1 out of 5 person and give her tangible, embraceable advice on better qualifying, on maybe not working with a couple of these clients who give jobs to 20 recruiters, guiding her so that she can improve her hit rate. And that, I would say, you mentioned the word empathy. I believe that managing recruiter productivity is mixing empathy with accountability. You use the word pressure. I use the word accountability. And you've got to build it. But how can you hold someone accountable unless they know what the steps are? Don't say to people, make more placements. Say to them, make more client interviews or whatever the action. Again, sporting analogy. It's no good saying to a person whose job it is to score goals and she hasn't been scoring goals to say, hey, could you score some goals? Knows that. That's not helpful. You have to say to her, take more shots on goal. Do the actions that lead to the outcomes. And so it all hinges on the leadership, and everything in recruitment is a leadership issue, not just bringing in their old KPIs from 1999 and giving them to everybody. There should be different. How can you give the same? And if you don't like the word KPIs, that's absolutely fine. Call them benchmark, call them dashboard, call them productivity goals, call them action steps. Don't care. You need them. You can't manage what you don't measure. And you need to sit with a person and say, okay, usually in a questioning way, what's your average placement fee, a permanent recruiter? And they'll say 10,000. You would have done the research to say, well, actually it's 7. No, it's not. Well, I took all your placements last year and I divided by the number of placements and it's 7. Oh, let's look. So how much are you going to bill this quarter? I'm going to bill 140,000. So how many placements do you have to make? Oh, 7 into 140, it's 14. It's 12. There's 13 weeks in a quarter. That's 1 a week. Now, most recruiters have no idea that that's their goal. They just got the number goal. So, okay, so now I know I've got to make a placement a week. Well, what can I do? How many interviews do you have to get with a client on average to make a placement? Oh, every second interview is a placement. Well, I've done the research and it's 1 out of 4. Oh, and then there's 2 things you can do about that. You've got to make a lot of interviews or you get a hit rate. Jobs filled, all those things. That's how you help a person. And you don't lecture them. You bring them on the journey. You bring them into the tent. I don't agree with this bullying people or threatening them to fire. I mean, that day may come and that person will give good advice, but it'll be based on the accountability of you hitting your numbers that we have agreed are the numbers you need to get, shots on goal, to get your outcome. And it's a weekly thing. So, okay, and the conversation will be a collaborative one. Okay, Susanna, what's your goal for this week? Well, I've got 6 jobs I'm trying to fill. And, I filled 6 last week, so I'm having a great month. So I'm going to focus on interviewing candidates for those jobs. Okay, that's good. How many of those jobs do you think you'll fill? The 6. Fill 3. And what about the others? They're in competition. I think I'll lose them. So that means in about a week, you're going to have 0 jobs. Oh, so what could we build into this week's activities apart from camp? Yeah, I better get out on the road and see some clients.
Love that.
And so it's a collaborative conversation. But then
what could we do? If
they agree they're going to do those things, it's written in blood with one proviso. That's kind of savage talk. It's written in blood. And what that means is you've agreed to do it. We've agreed it's achievable. If, for example, by Wednesday you find you're not going to hit it, come and tell me why. And that's fine. You might come and say, look, Greg, I know I said I was going to do 5 client meetings this week, but you don't know this, Greg. This morning I took 12 jobs. So I'm working on filling them. Cool. Let's talk Monday about next week's goal. All good. But don't just turn up a week later and say, I didn't do it. There's accountability.
Yes. And I
There's
love the fact
accountability.
that you said, tell me why, tell me how you get on, instead of you having to go to them and say, how are you getting on? Because there's that element of human beings, especially those who are high performers, hate the feeling of being managed. Why is Greg on top of me? Literally, I am working so hard. Why is he asking me questions? Why is he asking me questions? I'm already smashing my target. So why is he got beef with me? So I love the way that you questioned that. Bring them to come to you and have the accountability, which I think is great.
It's
Yeah.
a very important thing you raised, because when you have that meeting with them, they set the KPIs. You might tweak them. They might say, look, yeah, I'm going to do a lot more client work this week because my jobs are falling off, but I still got to interview these candidates. And you have that conversation and you say, so that's your plan? You're cool with it? And then as a manager, I might say, I think it's spot on. I think it's spot on. You're comfortable, you're going to do it. So when we meet for 15 minutes next Monday, you're going to have nailed that. Absolutely. Well, if anything goes off track, you come and see me by Wednesday. Now, here's where the accountability comes in. They don't come and see you by Wednesday. When I say come and see you, it could be a phone call, whatever.
Yeah.
And in the meeting on Monday, they say, look, Greg, I'm sorry, I didn't hit my numbers. And I'll say, but that's not possible because I was here on Wednesday. So you just, in other words, you're going to, and they're like, oh, I got busy. I said, mate, I don't know anyone in recruitment who's not busy. You said to me, if you weren't going to hit those numbers, which we have agreed is your goal, that you would tell me. So what happened? Now, that's an uncomfortable conversation for both the manager and the individual, but I have found it usually fixes it because it's their goal and they agreed to it.
I love that.
So that is, you asked the question, and it's not about bullying, and it's not about, I have found that people really, if you go through that backwards planning and say, look, you're filling one job out of 5. If we could ship that to 1 out of 4, you'll get a 20% upkick. No, I won't. Do the sums, mate. You'll get a 20% upkick for no more work. So let's work on qualifying job orders better, selecting jobs better. And, 6 months later, they're going to go, wow, actually, mostly they don't say anything until about 8 years later. You see them in the street and they say, that really made a difference. And it doesn't matter. You don't do it for that. It's accountability and empathy together. And you've got to, and when I say empathy, sometimes people won't hit their numbers. And sometimes you can see in their eyes that they just under pressure, and you'll just take the focus off it and say, what's up, mate? Maybe go for a walk and let's talk later, and go home. It's caring for the person as a whole person. And what people really want to know from their leadership is that you actually care.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not going down some hippie commune track. You care about their success as a business person, and that you will help them get there. And all your conversations have to be based on bringing them into the conversation, allowing them to understand how you can't score goals unless you take shots on goal. I know it's a very simplistic metaphor, but it's quite a good one, because it allows you to say, how are we going to get ourselves to make more shots? What are the things we got to do? What are the actions that lead to the outcomes we want? How can I help you? Training, support, whatever it might be. And slowly you get change in people's behavior. And this business of treating high performers as some elite species is totally wrong. They're the ones who need even more attention so that you can help them go from good to great. Yes. And everyone wins when that happens.
Absolutely love that. I think you've mentioned to me before about recruiters who may be looking. There's a lot of people out there who would love to work for companies where they're treated like this, but sadly, it's not always the case. And there are many recruiters who might be listening to this who are looking for a new role. How can they find the elite companies where they are looked after, trained, nurtured? I know it's a huge question, but what kind of signs can someone see at the job search stage?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing you should do is not assume that a large business or a small business will have those characteristics. In my experience, it's all over the place, both good and bad, right? So I think the first thing I would advise somebody to do is do your research in as much depth as possible. And the big mistake I see a lot of, and I saw it in that post-COVID boom when people were offering a lot of money for recruiters, is some recruiters were chasing a more advantageous bonus plan, and that was their most compelling priority. Let me say this, and a lot of people will take exception to it. The more generous the plan, the less resources and support you will get, generally speaking. The more generous. So I heard people saying, oh, I'm going to this company. I'm going to get 50% of what I built. I'm like, yeah, well, that's cool. But I promise you, you have a bad quarter, it'll be good night, nurse. And so some plans are more generous and some companies are more supportive. But what you want, you've got to ask detailed questions about the resources that you know will help you succeed. Who will my leader be? What's their expertise? Make sure you've got a good vibe with that person. You might have been interviewed by the CEO, but you're going to be supervised by the team leader, number one. Number two, how exactly does the bonus plan work? Number three, what marketing does the company do that helps me sell? What actual tools do they have? Here's a bonus plan where you get 50% of what you bill. Here's a bonus plan where you get 30% of what you bill. In the 50% one, you're given access to the company ATS and told to get on with it and start billing, maybe.
Yeah.
And on the other one, you're fed jobs. We've got PSAs or PSLs, whatever they're called in the UK. We've got a supportive environment. We've got training. We've got marketing. We have events. We've got repeat customers. A lot of things that are going to help you succeed. You will actually bill more in the 30% scenario. So
Yeah.
look at the support you're going to get. And don't get me wrong, just because the plan's good, it doesn't mean to say it's a bad company. But typically, you've got to balance the plan with the support that you will get. Just as the company's going to ask you for referees, you should ask them for referees. Do you have any ex-employees I can speak to? It's a great
And
bloody
retention,
question.
right? How long does the average person stay here? Such a great question, but nobody ever asks it because they're scared. And I would be impressed if someone asked me that at interview. I would be glad that they want to stay a long time. They're not looking to leave.
Yeah, I think you should definitely ask that question. And remember, it's quite easy to look up people who used to work at that company. And it'd be worth your while just reaching out. You've got to be a bit careful because you may hit somebody who's got a grudge to bear or whatever. But doing your research, there are things like Glassdoor and all the rest of it. But I think you should also ask pose scenarios like, okay, if I'd had a good quarter followed by an average quarter, and then I did have a poor quarter, but I was doing the work, what would the company's attitude to that be? How would the response be? So pose some scenario. Also, you can ask how the company would behave in ethical situations if you want, because I think it depends on what style of person you are. But I would encourage you to work for a company that's sort of unequivocal about their attitude to treating candidates and clients ethically.
Yeah.
So again, some hypotheticals. What would we do in this company if the candidate had 2 job offers and blah, blah, blah? Be interesting to hear what the reply would be.
Yeah. And also
I think you do your research.
What if we have another pandemic, right? What happens then?
Yeah.
I know it's a long time ago now, but I certainly noticed a lot about recruitment companies and how they reacted to their staff during COVID. I think it's a massive tell sign. Now, I know I keep looking at my clock thinking, please don't get to the end of this podcast. Please don't get to the end of this podcast. But I wanted to ask you the big question, the cliche question, the one everyone's talking about AI. And instead of just asking you a generic question, I'd be curious to know if you have anything that you've seen specifically with AI that is paying off for recruiters out there that recruiters might not know about.
The thing about AI is that I think the motor car was invented in around 1880. And we've now got to what a motor car is now. AI is like where the motor car was in 1915. It is just at the beginning of its journey. So in other words, it was slick for 1915, but when we look at it now, we go, that's just ridiculous. It's a terrible thing. That's where AI is now. But instead of taking 100 years to get to where the car is now, AI will take 3 to 5. So that's how quickly it's evolving. Right now, I actually think it's doing more harm than good. It's slowing the process down. It's making it much more cumbersome. Candidates are actually, the scales have tipped to the candidate's advantage with tech. Candidates can apply for jobs in bulk while they're asleep by setting an algorithm. They can have their resume finessed. They can have their cover letter. And when I say finessed, it could be just made nice and shipshape, or it could be packed with lies because the tools will match keywords and make stuff up. Applications to recruiters have gone through the roof. They've gone up by 50 to 60% across the world. More job applications. Now you might say, well, more candidates, that's good. It's not good because most of them are inappropriate. A lot of them are not truthful.
No. Yeah.
Even to the point where, I don't know if you know this, but you can get a tool on this. So we're on a VC now. Imagine you were interviewing me. I could put Copilot into my computer. I could put your LinkedIn profile, the job description, my resume. And as you ask me questions, Copilot will type the question. I can see it, you can't, and give me answers. So I can answer brilliant questions.
Yeah.
Because someone else is doing it for me. So there are also a lot of bad products out there. There are a lot of products touting themselves to be AI that are not AI. They're just automation, which is not a bad thing in itself, but they don't. And people, particularly in recruitment companies, because mostly in recruitment companies, we are small businesses, we don't have the bandwidth and the internal knowledge to assess whether the technology is going to solve our problems, whether it's ethical, whether it's unbiased, whether it even coincides with laws around AI, which are quite strong, particularly in Europe. And so I would say that the smart thing that owners of recruitment companies should do is to quietly sit down, talk to the team and understand which parts of the job should be automated and which part of the job should not be automated. That's the other thing I see with so many AI tools. They're automating. Like this guy's very happy to tell me that this job, told me the other day, this tool of mine, it's so good, it can tell a candidate and congratulate a candidate when they've had a baby in the family and wish them well. And I'm like, you think that's what somebody wants to hear from a machine? I said, if you're going to congratulate someone having a baby, it's got to be authentic. Otherwise, don't do it. He's like, oh. So I said, that's the wrong thing to automate. And this thing would make offers to people and everything else. And I'm like, you don't understand recruitment. That's not, I will make offers to those candidates and I will beat your machine on that part. But screening hundreds of candidates, passing in resumes, shortlisting, some engagement, there are tools that are doing it very well. So you wanted specific tools. There's a company called Atlas in the UK where basically it just does away with the need for any note taking because it records every conversation, interview, follow-up conversation with a candidate. You can simply say, okay, I interviewed this candidate. What are his 3 best skills? What does he know about SQL computing? And it'll just give you all the answers. So you never have to take a note, right? They take a job description. It's all there. And it's also listen to, you obviously get permissions, but it's listen to your telephone calls. It can read your emails. And so if you say, is this candidate suitable for this job? It'll go back over all that. And you say, why? It'll tell you.
Ooh.
So now that's
I thought I knew about my AI tools, but that one is something else. So I would definitely look that up. And as someone who is dyslexic, who loves picking up the phone and selling for the important tasks, not the impactful tasks, it's been really, really good for me when it comes to just even Booleans on LinkedIn. And it sets up Booleans for me and things like that. And as a dyslexic, it is great. But like you said, I know that if you and I were sitting in an office for one day, I was picking up the phone, and even you, as Greg Savage, was just using automation tools. I know which one of us would make more placement. The one picking up the phone, right?
Well, absolutely. As long as you're not picking up take, for example, if you ran a job ad and you got 300 candidates and then you thought you would phone screen them all, that you would lose. So it's the blend. It's you can steal this if you like. It's the marriage of art and science. Huh? So the science is the tech.
Yes.
And the art is the influencing skills, the phone, the face-to-face, the VC conversation. It's like my story of the recruiter who said to the candidate, send me your feedback by email. That is an absolute disaster because I could say to a candidate, so are you interested in the job? And if the answer is yes, that's a hell of a lot different to, yes, I love it. I'll walk out of a glass for it. A big difference, right? It wouldn't come across in an email. So going back to AI, there's a tool in Australia called Synaptico, and it's built on the premise that, which I agree with. In fact, I think they stole my phrase on this, that recruitment company databases are full of our graveyards, right? We've got all these candidates in there. We say we've got 150,000 candidates, and it's true, but we can't access them because we don't engage with them. So it's an AI tool which says, okay, I need a SAP consultant with these criteria, and it will go to your database. It'll find those people. It'll send an email or a text, depending on your brief, to the machine. It will engage with them and say, hey, we've got this job opportunity. And it's smart enough to have a conversation. So they say, well, actually, I'm now an SAP supervisor. Is this job suitable? And the thing will say, no, actually, it's not. But tell me about what you're looking for. And let's update your resume. All automated. And then it'll get to the point where if it's briefed, if it's screened a candidate, had that conversation, if the candidate's right for the brief, it'll then set up a VC interview for a human being. Now, that is the marriage of art and science, right?
Wow.
Because if I said to a consultant, could you quickly phone 2,000 candidates and see what they're doing? We haven't spoken to them for 5 years. That's not going to happen. Can't happen. But a machine can do it in an hour. And then you'll end up with,
that called?
With Synaptico, Synaptico, Synaptico.
Wow. Amazing.
So I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are, I said it's making it worse, and it is, but that's only temporary. And certainly no one in recruitment should bury their head in the sand. It's not a binary argument. And people tend to say it's a human business, recruitment. It's all about AIs can't play a role. Or they say, we don't need people, recruitment's going to be wiped out and it'll all be done by AI. They are both wrong, right? It is a blend. And the real competition is to have the automation and the technology doing the part of the job that machines can do better than people. And they can do it better than people at the same time, not harming the candidate or the client or the recruiter experience. That's actually an important part of it. Then you've got to have recruiters have the skill to really, really excel at the part of the job that only humans can do, which is consulting and advising and persuading and influencing and creating outcomes. And that's where recruitment's headed. Yes. So if you're a transactional recruiter, you'll be smashed by machines and you won't be able to compete with consultative recruiters. So yeah, that's not a good place.
What a great answer. And I'm so glad that you gave. I love that idea of the marriage of science. And what was the other one? Science and
Arts and science. I mean,
yes.
the art, by that I mean art, not
Right.
painting. I mean the art of influence,
Yes.
the
Yes.
listening
The art of
skills,
skill.
the
Yeah. No.
consulting skills, the persuading skills. All the greats are good. I don't mean selling somebody a job that they don't. But you've done this. You've spoken to a candidate and you said, I've got this great job. And she said, oh, I've never heard of that company. I don't think I'll be interested. And then you've said, hold on, let me tell you more. And by the time you finished, she says she'll go to the interview. And she loves the interview and she gets the job. That was an
Yeah.
art. That's an influencing skill. That's the fun of the job.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's where we can make a massive difference because a piece of tech can't really do that because everyone knows it's a piece of tech. Whereas you can say, I've placed people there before and I know the CEO. He's a good guy. In fact, I used to work. It's all be true, but you can story tell, which
Yes.
is a great recruiter skill.
Storytelling. Absolutely. It's a whole nother episode. I think as we draw to a close, one thing that
Yeah.
I would love to know about you, and you might not feel comfortable sharing, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What has been the most embarrassing moment or biggest faux pas that you have had as a recruiter, knowing that you started
Oh,
recruiter 1980, you say? So,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, there's countless of them, but one that is probably the worst. I got two for you. So one, I was in London. I've been a recruiter about 5 or 6 years. I was in about 25. It was a fast-moving environment. There were 6 or 7 of us in a room no bigger than this study that I'm in now. It was all on the phone. There were no computers. We interviewed candidates behind a screen. The job came in. We all picked up the phone. First one picked up the phone and it was a client giving a job as accounting recruitment. We would take the job and then we would sell candidates over the phone. And then the next person would go and take over the phone. The client calling for the job could have 16 interviews. We hadn't even spoken to the candidates, right? This is the wild west of recruiting in the mid-80s in Oxford Circus, London. And then what we'd do is we'd send out resumes to the client. We'd get the jobs would come around from the other branches of this company. We'd look through them, assistant accountant, Bayswater, yeah, I'll send Mary. And then an admin person would send the resume and post it, right? Because of those days, or bike it around, whatever it was. Anyway, got this call from this client. He asked for me, picked up the phone. He said, Mr. Savage, because it was England in the 1980s. I said, yes. He said, did you send me the resume of Mary Jones? I said, yes, I did, thinking he wants my candidate. And he said, oh, good. Thank you for that. She works for me. I can see her through my cubicle. I didn't know she was looking for a job. I'd sent a woman's resume to her own boss.
Oh no. Gosh. What did you
So,
say then? What did you say?
well, he put the phone down. He said, thank you very much. So I called her for months. I've never spoken to her. That happened in 1983. I still occasionally search for her name on LinkedIn. She'd probably be 60 plus. She might be retired, whatever. But can I excuse myself? I'll give myself 20% leeway because that was the environment. It was fast, it was furious. You didn't speak to candidates first. But it taught me a great lesson about care and process and remembering that we're dealing with people's lives, right? So I don't know what happened to her. There's no internet. I couldn't see whether she got another job on LinkedIn or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to remember it's like no mobile phone, right? So I could only phone her on her work number, which was the office number, or on her home number. When I phoned her home number, some drunk Kiwi backpacker picked up the phone. So I didn't really get anywhere. So that was one. Another one was, again, doesn't reflect very well on me. Big lessons learned was in Sydney 10 years later, maybe, when I was running that company. And I used to love going on client visits. And I knew I had a client visit that afternoon, but I was busy and I didn't do the preparation. I didn't look closely at who the client was. I didn't look at where it was. I didn't do the prep, which I now lecture people on. And I raced off there and I was a bit late, a bit arrogant maybe, sat down opposite the person, did the meeting. And when it got to the second half of the meeting, I said to him, as I normally do, so Mr. Prospect, Mr. Whoever, have you ever heard of our company, Recruitment Solutions? And he said, yes, I have. In actual fact, you've placed me here. I said, I had a company of 50 people or 60 people. So I said, oh, one of my consultants placed you here. He said, no, Greg, you
Oh
placed me here.
no. Oh, poor
And
guy.
as he did, I remembered it. As he said that, I remembered everything. I swear to God, I remembered his wife's name as he said that. It all came back to me. That meeting did not go well because it showed that I was shallow and flighty. And even you can't be expected to remember everybody off the top of a head, but we had a database. I could have researched it. I
Yeah.
would have remembered that I placed him. It would have been there on the placement records, and I didn't. So those are just a few. I made a lot of mistakes as a leader as well. Not thoughtless mistakes like that, but just misjudgment, not listening enough early on, being too prescriptive. You learn over time that there's a better way. So
Well,
I
it's
think I'm better
great
at
to
it
know.
now.
It's great to know that someone like yourself is human. I have had similar situations where a client has maybe let on to the current employer of that person because I didn't know there was a link, and they've got my candidate in trouble and things like that. And I've learned that often the best way is to just put your hands up and say sorry. And unfortunately, these things do happen, but it's good to know that they happen to Greg Savage as
Oh
well.
God! Look, I wasn't anything special. I was a good recruiter, yeah, but I wasn't great. And by the way, you're going to make mistakes. Those are calamitous misjudgments by me. But even day-to-day mistakes, the lesson for people, recruiters, there is that you can actually improve your client relationship and your candidate relationship by how you respond to your mistake. If you ignore it, try to cover it up, bluff, lie, they will never forgive you. It's like you go to your favorite restaurant and it's really bad. They overcooked the food, something's wrong. And you tell the waiter, and he says, no, no, you're wrong. That's how we do it. Da, da, da. You will never go back, right? And you will criticize it. But if they fix it, give you a bottle of champagne, apologize, you go away saying it's the greatest restaurant in the world, even though
Yeah.
they screwed up. It's how you respond, it's customer recovery. And it
Respond.
builds trust with your client if you can say, I got that wrong, but I've now got this solution. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I dropped the ball there. Or, look, you don't want to hear this, but things out of my control happen. She decided to follow her boyfriend to Queensland. She doesn't want the job anymore.
Yeah.
But I take it on my shoulders. I didn't manage that well, but I'm going to fix it for you. The client will go, he'd be pissed off maybe, but he's going to go, okay, honesty,
Yeah.
transparency, and effort. And they'll forgive you. But when you lie and sidestep it, as so many people do, they'll never forgive you.
Honesty, transparency, and effort. I love that. What are you doing next, Greg? So there'll be people listening to this now. They might want to get in contact with you. I know you'll be in
Oh,
England in March at the Recruitment Expo. Are you writing any more books? How can people reach out to you and follow you?
well, the best thing to do is if you're in the UK, I'd love you to come to one of my masterclasses with the REC. So that'll be on their website. It's called something like Being a Great Recruiter in an AI World. It's a half day, and you've got a taste of some of it today. So that's definitely worth coming to. Edinburgh, Manchester, London. And then the Recruitment Expo, yep, it's a great event. I enjoy it because you meet so many interesting people. I'm speaking both days about leadership and something else, consultant productivity. So that would be good. As I said, the academy has had a complete revamp. And certainly, I mean, whether it be my academy or something else, people should invest in developing their recruiters. That is the key. Not writing any more books. I'm actually trying to wind back and do other things. I'm finding it hard. I have cut down my board appointments from 16 to 9, you'll be pleased to hear. So that's
Wow.
helped.
Good.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice. Well, you're
Mm,
looking very well. And honestly, it really
thank
is
you.
to have you on here again. And I have to come up with some other bribe for next year. I've learned a new song or something. We'll come up with something. But thank you so
The
much.
song's not going to cut it. It's good, but it's going to have to be more like wine. So you have to get on that.
The wine will
Come to
come.
the expo.
Do you
Yeah.
know what? Yeah, I will let you know when I'm in the UK, or I need to go to Australia still. And let me know if you come to the Middle East and we'll make it happen. But yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, I do come to the Middle East for 3 hours in the Emirates lounge, and then I keep going. So that's it.
No worries. Well, thank you very much. And we will keep in touch.